Welcome to Success Your Own Way, a podcast about how real people define and redefine success throughout their careers. Hosted by Tina Shurick and Yifat Rogers, this show features candid conversations with guests who've made intentional choices, navigated change, and built lives aligned to their values. Their guests share their stories as well as strategies and tactics that help them along the way. Tina's a certified coach and a former corporate leader who supports professionals in making confident, values-driven decisions. Yifat is a consultant with a background in food science and engineering, helping people solve complex problems with a practical, no-nonsense approach. Each episode offers inspiration and actionable insights for anyone rethinking what success looks like in their life and how to get there.
Welcome to Success Your Own Way, our podcast. I am joined today by my co-host, Yifat Rogers, and she is going to be on the hot seat today. And we're going to learn a little bit more about Yifat and her background and what success looks like for her. So welcome, Yifat.
Thank you, Tina. I am nervous. Being the person asking the questions is so much easier than being the person answering them. So I am nervous. So bear with me.
Well, take a deep breath and relax. It's just like you and I having coffee, right?
Yes.
So, amazing. Well, let's start by letting our listeners know a little bit more about who you are, what your background is.
Yeah. So Yifat, I am actually in Minnesota with Tina. I immigrated to the United States a little over 20 years ago. I came here to get my master's in food science. So I'm a food scientist. I also have my PhD, and after that I came to Minnesota to work at General Mills for almost 13 years.
Wow.
4 years ago, I took a step back. I survived a round of layoffs and realized that I'm not happy where I ended up afterwards, and I had to take a step back. I had to reevaluate what I thought success looked like when I was younger, and I did, and started my consulting business, where I provide a lot of technical consulting in the food industry. I ended up getting my PhD at some point. And so that is one part of my consulting. I also developed the Eureka Framework, which we're probably going to hear a lot about. Could be a good drinking game every time I mention the Eureka Framework or Regress to Progress. So that is another focus. And then more recently, with this podcast, I'm also getting into a little bit of mentoring, not coaching, but mentoring of people like me that have left corporate and started their own business and are now struggling with some of the things that are missing when you go on your own, that we take a little bit of granted. So that's where I am right now, consulting, and yeah.
I love that. Such a cool background. I've gotten to know Yifat over the last couple of years or so, and just really intrigued by her experiences, especially in the food area. Every time I open a box of cereal, I'm like, oh yes, I know people in food science. That's amazing. So I've learned a lot from Yifat already. So you mentioned this podcast. Did your 20-year-old self dream of doing a podcast, and why this one?
My 20-year-old would be, the answer is no. Podcast didn't exist at the time, so many years ago, and I would have been terrified. I would have been terrified to put myself out there and have my thoughts, even recorded. That's part of the anxiety. But at this point, 25 years later, I'm willing to jump in and let go of some of that control, I will almost call, and be a little more vulnerable on camera. The reason I wanted to start this podcast with you was I listened to a lot of podcasts, and amazing hosts out there, but I found a lot of them to be very inspiring, but a little lacking in like more strategic view and tactics. I found some that were very tactical. Here is what needs to show up on your LinkedIn. I was like, well, know where is the inspiration or where is the strategy. So I couldn't really find the one podcast that I wanted.
Yeah.
So I wanted to create that podcast and have this experience with you and bring guests that will be inspiring, but also provide some kind of strategic overview and tactical kind of day-to-day approach and tips. So that is really it. Success your own way, because I believe that success is personal. I believe that many times we get what success is from external factors that are not necessarily about us. And I also think that you don't know what you don't know, and the way to learn it is to listen to others. So that's why I wanted to talk to people, not just from the food industry, which is kind of where I'm most of my network, but people like Tina, some of our guests that are from different industries, wanted to learn more and bring it to my career and my personal growth. So this is really a passion project and a ton of fun. I just wanted to talk to cool people on camera.
I think that's awesome. You have so much to offer. Your background and your experience is worth sharing. So I'm super glad that you became courageous and are willing to get out there and share it with people. I think they'll be inspired. And
I hope so.
I'm going to get into that. Right. So Yifat, you mentioned the Eureka Framework. So what inspired you to put your professional experience into action and into an actionable framework that can be applied in so many different ways, from the professional setting to the technical problem solving to the personal growth?
That is a great question. I think I've always kind of done the Eureka Framework. I'll talk about it in a second, but really what inspired me was about 3.5 years ago, where I learned more about kind of project management, some of the language, some of the theory that really helped me put my pillars and principles that I'll talk about into a framework. Okay. So something I can share and consistently deliver on. It's based on 3 pillars: mindset, process, and expertise. I'm a big process proponent, so really understanding what is it that we need to do and not just the aspirational. I'm a tactical person. I like to have steps. So mindset is really the how we think about things. Process is, again, what do we put in place, from what do we want to do all the way to prioritization and like the nitty-gritty. What are the next 2 steps you need to take? And then the last one is expertise. Knowing who to reach out to. What is it that you need to get from them? So it could be experts in a technical field. It could be could be an expert coach that can bring a different perspective and ask different questions. Experts in you, listen to your friends and family. So expertise, I almost say, if you put the right experts, you don't need to even worry about thinking outside the box, because the box is determined by the experts that put dots on the map. So the more of those, the bigger your box is, and you don't really need to think outside of it. So those are kind of like the 3 pillars: the mindset, process, and expertise, that a holistic view. And then from there, I have kind of like my 5 principles. The first one that I'm really attached to is regress to progress. It's the idea of almost going back to first principles a little bit, if you're talking more in a science, which is really understanding the basics. What is it that you want? What is it that you need? What is it that your technical problem wants or need? So setting that up and then almost recharting a course. It's not about regretting how you got to a point, but it's about debriefing. It's about kind of understanding and mindfully going, understanding the decision points and how they were made and what were the results. Challenging assumptions. I am great at self-talk. Almost everyone I talk to is great at self-talk, and we don't stop often enough to ask, how do you know? So when someone tells me, and again, could be in a professional or personal setting, could be for myself, and I catch myself saying something like anything, is asking, how do you actually know that?
Yeah.
That is almost, to me, a question that comes before why. Because you may actually end up with, I don't know that. I've just been talking to myself, but I don't have any data to support it.
Sure.
I don't have any of that. So it's really challenging assumptions and then continuing to grow once you've either validated, so turning assumptions or beliefs into facts, or letting go of assumptions that don't actually measure up to what we've been thinking.
Sure.
Related to that is the definition of problem and or success. What is it that we're going after? Are we going after some expectation where success in corporate is to climb up a ladder of some sort? Is that really your definition of success? Which is kind of how we ended up with this podcast.
Yeah.
So defining it. The last two principles of the Eureka Framework are more tactical. So I have prioritize like you mean it. So not that I can do it all, but really what do you need to do that will drive the most benefit, and not just what we should be doing. So being able to prioritize really, and that's also where the mindset comes in, and challenging assumptions. We say should a lot. I find that most of the time when I say should, if I challenge that assumption and ask some questions, I get to the point where it's like, no, I really don't need to do it, and I don't want to do it. So I don't do it. So that's part of prioritization, and really assessing what are the trade-offs.
Sure. And
picking the best one or two things to move forward. And then the very last one I call iterate to accelerate.
Okay.
We don't know everything. There is, I don't know, a single person that just gets it right from the first moment. And we need to iterate. It doesn't mean that every time something doesn't go as planned, you need to jump all the way to the beginning and continue, regress. No, ultimately the idea is to keep moving forward. But to do that, sometimes we need to iterate. We need to try some things, and if they don't work, then we go back to the drawing board a little bit, or just on a piece of it, and kind of keep moving forward from that. So a little bit of iteration, a little bit of trial and error. There is no data out there that we can do other than the data that we collect along the way. So again, the Eureka Framework, I apply it professionally a lot with groups. That's part of what I do with my consulting, is technical problem solving. Personally, I use it. Anything from making a quilt and creating the process, like how do I start? Why do I want to do it? What does a successful quilt look like? All the way to when I deal with my son and I try to get him to think about mindset, and then he goes like, the Eureka Framework, which is super cute. He's 11. So yes, I've been applying it, and now kind of with this podcast, I want to bring that mindset to people more like me that have gone through a certain journey. And when you get to the point when you're leaving corporate and no longer have the support, you can say a lot of things about corporate, but it does offer support as far as many times personal and professional growth. Those are missing. There are deadlines. When you go on your own, it's a little harder. You need to seek out those opportunities. It's no longer passive. And then how do you get to a point where instead of doing an 8 to 4, 8 to 5, again, deadlines, you are your own boss? And it can be very overwhelming. And I've used the Eureka Framework with some, informal and some formal clients, and following the same principles lead to progress, leads to clarity. I think that is a big piece of all of it, is getting that clarity, and then the actual tactics and next steps to go about it. And we build it together. I am not an expert in some of the industries that I work with clients. One of them is an artist. But the principles are, you can use them across multiple disciplines. So really, I look at it more as mentorship and not so much as coaching, because it's following the Eureka Framework and has very specific kind of way and questions that help people chart their own path and their own course with a little bit of clarity. And honestly, a little bit of an accountability partner. So I do serve that in all of my capacities.
Yeah, so important to have that accountability. And I'm a huge fan of frameworks personally. I think one of my bosses many years ago really amplified the need for a framework and the use of frameworks when you're trying to be strategic. And even when you're executing, it can be strategic if you're doing it within a framework. So I've learned from Yifat this Eureka Framework. I may be putting some of these principles into place myself. So again, I get the benefit of learning from her through this podcast work, which has been great.
And I will add one more thing about framework, and it's specifically, I call it framework. This is not a template. I do not believe in templates.
Yeah.
I feel that templates are, by definition, against the Eureka Framework, because you're starting with something that someone else put based off of their definition, and not something that is flexible and adjustable. So it's not a template. It's not just one process. It's a framework. It's a way to go through the thought process and really putting the steps in place.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Awesome. Well, as we look to wrap up our time together here today, is there any advice that you would like to offer for someone trying to redefine success as you have?
So I talked a lot about clarity, alignment. That is what I think success is. If I go on a technical, really small, clear steps could be more powerful than a vague aspiration. So to me is thinking about those small steps. So when we get to, I procrastinate a lot, and one of the things that I found has been helping is, I have this big thing to do, is not thinking about the big thing that you need to do in like this giant timeline, but things like, okay, what are really the next 2 things I need to do?
Yeah.
And one of them could be just download all of those forms you need for your taxes. Like that is a next step, as opposed to do your taxes.
Right.
So breaking things down and just understanding it every time. What are the next 2 steps? Which again goes after my process.
Yes.
With the Eureka Framework, and then kind of moving forward and asking yourself challenging assumptions and just asking the question, how do you know? And then, is it important? So that helps with the prioritization. And we talk a lot about perfectionism. So that's just always an internal thing and something that I struggle with, which is, who is the perfectionism benefiting, and what is really the added benefit of putting another like almost exponential time to get things to be very like to the peak of perfection.
Right.
So it's really understanding and going back to prioritization, and it's work in progress for me, for my clients, technical and kind of from mentorship. So those are probably the big things that you can just ask. It's a thought exercise.
Yeah. Love that. Those are great tips. Thank you. And it is a good reminder to just, take 1 or 2 steps and think about what's that. Otherwise, you get a little overwhelmed with all of the things that are on your plate, I'm sure. So if our listeners want to learn more about you, Yifat, or how to find you, where can they go?
They can go to yanivconsulting.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I will actually publish a book called the Eureka Framework, probably kind of Q4 fiscal 25. So hoping to get this out in October. So that will also be on my website with the ability to pre-order.
Oh, that's exciting. Good for you, an author in our midst. So awesome. Well, it's been my pleasure to get to know a little bit more about you, Yifat, and also hear a little bit more about this Eureka Framework. I'm looking forward to putting it into practice. And for our listeners out there, thanks for listening today and making the time for Success Your Own Way. And please share this with your friends, and feel free to comment or let us know what you'd like to hear more about from the 2 of us. So thank you. Thank you, Yifat.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Success Your Own Way. We hope you found this episode inspiring and took away actionable insights. Please tune in for our next episode. And if you know someone who is rethinking what success looks like in their life, please share this episode with them.